There we go. Did you see the message saying, hey, you're being recorded? Okay.
Yes.
And I saw Paul just tried to join. Alex and Rachel, you see below you Marie Muller. Marie is our town's historian, and she is also the mayor's wife. And Paul, thanks for joining us. Paul, as you guys know, Alex and Rachel is the moderator, one of the moderators for Good Old Haskell.
Yes.
So I'm sure people are going to be dropping in, and we'll welcome them as they come. But Marie, I don't know, did I mention this project to you when it first started, or did I?
Yes, I think we talked about it at the town hall one day at the
Oh, right, yeah.
holiday party.
Right. Well, and Paul, one of the things that your group is so great for is for somebody like me who's coming in to manage the library's archives. And I didn't grow up in town, and this group is such a great resource for people who have actually lived in town and have the history and, you know, can say, you know, I was just looking at some posts tonight. People posted old grade school photos and like, oh yeah, I remember Jimmy, I used to play with him. So Paul, how long has the group been going on?
Well, the group was founded by Chris Wellens, and I believe that was in 2010 that he started the group. I came along later, and it's been a labor of love.
Yeah.
I grew up in Wanaque. I left in 1987, but I've never lost my interest in the history of where I grew up.
Yeah. What I like about your group especially is that you are limited to historical stuff. There's not a whole lot of posts about, you know, lost cats or,
Right.
you know, things for sale.
Right. And I take a lot of flack for that sometimes, but that's the way we like to keep it because we think it's what makes us unique. And we also want to be a local resource for information about the town.
Right. So I know when I first got Rachel and Alex involved, I could see their eyes light up when I said, you know, there's a lot of information on the Good Old Haskell Facebook group about the UFOs. And they're like, what?
Yes.
That was definitely one of the more fun subjects to like browse through and just get very invested in through our indexing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So do you guys want to tell us about some of the topics that you worked on?
Yeah, we can get started. Rachel and I, in particular, in addition to the 1966 UFO sighting, we were also very interested in the Wanaque Dam and the local businesses within the region. Just learning about like, oh, this was the Wanaque Spa, or this was Woolworth and Company, and like this movie theater, just the many like different lives that came through the region was very fascinating to see, and just one micro universe within the country. Yeah. Did you have any other particular topics, Rachel?
Yeah, totally. On the reservoir, I thought it was really fascinating too. Like there was a lot of conversation about the creation of the reservoir, but also about the buildings and places that had been there like before the reservoir that were sort of like disappeared in order to make the reservoir, I believe. I know I saw one person posting about how they wish there was sort of more information sort of in one place about what had been there before. And I thought that was really interesting and something that I hope maybe some of what we started could pave the way for in the future.
Right. Well, the archives that we have in the library right now, we have a large collection of our own archives, but also we have the entire collection that Sam DiBenedetto donated to the library. And one of the reasons I really was glad that you guys took this project on was because I could learn from you what people seem to want to see, because our local history section of our library website hasn't really been updated since 2 directors ago. And he copied a lot of that from a document that was 1 or 2 documents that were originally in the 1968 Golden Jubilee celebration. So I think it's a crime we don't have anything about the UFOs. And I think the library website would be a great place to have people, have an index of places and people. And so that's why I'm so grateful that you took this project on, because it showed us what we can do on the library site and what we can do together with the people who are in good old Haskell to really make the history come alive in a way that just opening a file drawer doesn't.
Right. Listen or reading the responses from our initial survey as well. Just knowing exactly like, oh, this is what we want, like everyone was so generative of ideas, just subjects that we never would have like guessed or imagined trying to start building upon for this index at all. It was just very fascinating, just everyone's immediate interest within the project.
Yeah. And so Rachel and Alex gave me a document that explained the process they went through, so that now I can go through, or I can ask for volunteers from good old Haskell to go through and continue that work. The other neat thing about the document that Alex and Rachel created was it included the name of the original poster, plus all the commenters, plus a sort of a synopsis of what the post was about. So that means that if I want to get information about a certain, say, business that people mentioned, I'll know who I can contact on good old Haskell.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. So Paul, did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
My question is what sparked your interest in wanting to archive our group?
Well, I got a call from somebody who lived in California last fall, and she said, I grew up in Wanaque, and I've been trying to remember the name of this store where I got my gym uniform for the last 2 weeks. And I said, okay, well, let me see what I can do. And I thought, holy cow, that's not going to be something that's down in the file cabinet.
Right, right.
But I remembered that good old Haskell had been useful to me before, because I had posted some photos that I was trying to identify in your group, and people were very generous about responding. So then I thought, well, yeah, I could post in your group, but let me just see searching your group. So I used the search the group function, and I found several posts from a couple of years ago talking about the Clover Shop and those awful one-piece green gym uniforms. And then that started me thinking, I'm like, that's an amazing amount of, that's not something that you would find in traditional library archive.
Right.
And it felt like a shame that I felt like I wanted to know more. Yeah, a lot of people remember the gym uniforms. They were, I have to say, they sounded horrific.
Right. So how did Alex and Rachel become involved with the process?
Well, the University of Michigan, Alex and Rachel's professor, they are in need of projects for their students. So they invited libraries across the country to write proposals to see if we could entice some students into being interested. So I wrote a proposal explaining how I had gotten interested in this group and what kinds of information. And I said, look, we don't have the staff to do this. And I don't even know if it's possible to do this, but it's really interesting. And luckily, Alex and Rachel took the bait.
Well, I'm glad they did.
Yeah.
So what was the most intriguing thing that you came across in our group that maybe you were not expecting or unaware of?
Trying to think.
Or maybe just something you found funny or interesting.
Yeah. Did you have something, Alex? Or
Oh, I was gonna say kind of in more in the vein of your first question of like unexpected content, but the Judge Crescente case,
Yes.
that little like I guess murder mystery aspect of it, that was a big shocker for me.
Yeah.
Did you, Rachel?
yeah, I found some of the discussion. There was a lot of talk about sort of like old like building ruins like in the woods, of
Yes.
sort of mysterious origin or like sort of vaguely connected to like the old like DuPont facilities. And I thought that was like a really fascinating like potential rabbit hole to go down.
Right. I appreciate the work that you've done.
It was really fun, so happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And our classmate has shared in the chat a link for more on the UFO resources as well. So thank you, Em.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Em. Yeah.
yeah, New Fork is I know some of us also worked with New Fork data in another class before, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah. Also, Marie, I know, Marie has a lot of photos. Actually, one of the things that I was thinking about might be neat for the future. I know, Marie, you have a lot of photos, but I have a lot of photos that Sam gave us that aren't that well, that I don't have cataloged very well. So I kind of thought it would be interesting in the future to do maybe like once a week. Do you know anything about this photo? And actually, I wanted to talk to you, Paul, because I'm going to post something in a couple of weeks. Do you know the hitching post that's outside the library?
Yes.
So I'm trying to find out. I've traced it back to a butcher shop that was located in town in, I think, the 1910s. And I think that the woman who gave it to the town did so in the early 2000s because she moved out of town, and she has since passed away. But I thought, people come into the library all the time and they're like, what is that thing out there? So that's another thing I want to put on the website.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So this was really, having Rachel and Alex do this project was a good way for me to make time to learn about the archives. And I have to say, I have a local volunteer, Richard Riley, who was extremely helpful. He sat in on the meetings with Alex and me and gave us a lot of pointers and was very helpful as well. So this was just a really good opportunity for me to learn more about the archives and for me to get some free work from Alex and Rachel.
It was all good work.
Yeah, we were glad to do it.
I enticed you with murders and UFOs.
Right. What more could you ask for?
Well, the one thing about Wanaque is, I think, with the advent of the reservoir, and I think people who live there today find it very intriguing that there was basically a whole section of town that was lost and inundated with this new reservoir. And I know myself, I often try to go back in time and wonder what it must have been like living in that area and what it might have looked like, or what the roads were like, or what the neighbors were like, or what the farms were like. So I think a lot of people also find that intriguing as well. And same thing with the DuPont ruins. There's a whole section of town that was once a bustling munitions plant. It no longer exists. And I think when the new highway, Route 287, came through, that opened up that area for people to discover who had never even known it existed.
I remember one of the first meetings I had with Rachel and Alex, we looked up the Wanaque Reservoir, and one of the first posts we saw had people commenting, oh yeah, my grandfather worked on that, or, you know, my great uncle told me stories about when he was helping to build it.
Right.
And, I know we have a lot of people who came to Wanaque as adults and settled, but we still have a lot of people who grew up in Wanaque and, still live there, or like you, Paul, still have a fondness for it in their heart.
Right.
There was, oh, sorry, like with the Wanaque Reservoir and the Erie Railroad Company, just those two sections, like in the comments, everyone was like eager to show like, oh, this was, my relative who was a part of the railroad company. This was like his ID and stuff. Like everyone was so eager to share, and it was like very past meets present, all on like the same platform. So yeah, very much speaks to the DuPont and other subjects.
Yeah.
There are many, also many longtime families that still have descendants that live in the area. I know Marie, I know you're involved with the Ryan Smith family. I always enjoy your posts about their history. And there's several families like that. We have one member, John Beam, who's, I believe, in his 90s, and his family was one of the original settlers of what's now called Wanaque. So it's all of it's very fascinating to me, and I hope it's fascinating to everyone here as well.
Yeah.
On a related note, I had a gentleman come in today. Actually, Marie, I'm going to call you tomorrow because his great grandparents were buried in the Midvale Cemetery. And in the course of our conversation, he said that when I guess the church closed, the land ended up in the Cisco family. And I thought to myself, oh, Cisco, that was the patrolman who first reported the UFO.
I think another part too was like on that like interconnectedness of like, oh, well, this name was mentioned on the patrol. And then they were also mentioned in just a more general post about like the fire crew or the policemen of the Wanaque region, and just seeing like, oh, they were involved in here and here, like different points of history connected across. And I also liked seeing the different posters to the site as sort of like centers for information about particular topics. Like Paul, you were, I like to see many of your posts in the photos shared across subjects. And then I remember his last name was like Bjorndal or something, but yeah, like there'd just be certain people that, yeah, they just be like, oh, you would be a great source. Like, I'd love to hear more, like just pick your brain about the train station or this or the Crescente story or just other regions of Wanaque and Ringwood.
Right. I'm curious to know, did you have a lot of people responding to you from the group
So
in terms of your initial, I know there was an initial request that was sent out for contact information, etc.
Mhm.
Curious to
You
know
guys
how many-
told me you had about 11 or 12 people respond.
I think we ended up with about 23 responses
okay.
in the end, actually. Yeah. So there was a really good response.
That's great.
And we do also have those saved and sent to Mary as well. So
I looked at those,
Yeah.
yeah. And we're gonna have to figure out how to, I'll work with you and Hans, Paul, to figure out how to, make this accessible to the group.
Right.
I just remember when I was in school, history was very boring to me. This group really is great because it brings context and it brings things alive. Like you were saying, Alex, oh, this guy was doing this and he was also doing that. And he was this person's great granddad and he used to tell stories. So it really brings, it's just a really rich art resource for actual people telling real stories and
Right.
in interesting stuff in the way that sometimes, it used to be when I would read history textbooks, all of the interesting stuff was sort of leached out of it, but not this group.
Yeah, well, that's part of why Chris started the group, is because it's not just photos, and it's not just people's names. There's actually stories
Yeah,
associated with each person. A community is not just people, but also the stories that go with them. So that, I think that's what he wanted to establish, and Hans and I work hard to try to carry that tradition.
yeah. Well, does anybody else have any questions or comments? Paul, I want to thank you and Hans for being so gracious and letting us come and tromp in your group. And
No problem. I appreciate that you have the interest in it.
yeah. And Alex and Rachel, it's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you guys.
We appreciate the hard work.
And thanks, Kristen, for allowing Alex for choosing our proposal so that Alex and Rachel could choose us. It was great. I look forward to working with you again in the future. And Alex and Rachel, you two will get letters of recommendation, and anything I can do to help you in your job search, you let me know, okay?
All right. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Can I ask a question?
Emery,
Um, I guess I'm sort of lost in this whole thing. What kind of format is this now in?
right now, oh, well, I should shut up. You guys can tell her.
Yeah, so we have, it's just a spreadsheet in Google Sheets. It's sort of an index. It's grouped by subject, so you can just sort of like click through the different sheets and then scroll through and find the links to different posts. And there's some information with each post about like the main information that you can find in the post. So you can sort of scroll through really fast and see if a post is going to be like relevant to a subject you're searching for.
Okay.
So Marie, I can actually share, Alex and Rachel, what I did was I made copies of your stuff and moved it to our archive. So Marie, if you want to take a look at it, it's fascinating because it gives you a permanent link to the Facebook post, and then it shows the original poster and any commenters, and it gives you a summary of what the post was about and any external links. Richard and I were looking at one of the UFO posts that Alex and Rachel found, and we discovered a video that neither of us had ever seen. So it was kind of neat that way too.
Okay.
Well, thank you all very much for attending the open house. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Alex and Rachel, good luck in your job hunting and in your career, and I will speak to you soon.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
Good night.